Hey everybody, welcome to Fantasy R&R. This is your host Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And this is week 11 of Fantasy Football 2022, Fantasy Unfocused.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan, Fantasy R&R.
Completely different format. Let's say you're leading the league, which you were last week in our ESPN Fantasy League, our Keeper League. Ross is currently in first place right now, barely, but it's because you took a hard L to a very lucky Stephanie with Mixon. And now you got this issue going on. You just picked up Justin Fields. We've been talking about on the podcast how he's been looking better, how I wanted to put a waiver claim in for him. We saw a couple of 20-point performances from him. Now we just saw a 48-point ceiling. You're asking me, do you roll with Kyler Murray, and you could potentially go with Fields for the rest of the year? And I think it's going to be interesting to hear your perspective on why you think that this guy that was on the waiver wires for like 6-7 weeks is now going to be your QB1 going into championship season when nobody else is changing their roster in our league.
Yeah, I mean, this was something I kind of came up with, a few weeks ago. I remember I reached out to you, Ryan, going, dude, I don't know about Kyler. He's starting to kind of irk me a little bit. I sent out a couple like feeler trades for Justin Herbert. I was kind of asking around if anybody was looking at moving a quarterback. And Justin Fields, I know earlier in the year I said was a bust. Very similar to what you had said about Kupp, and you're kind of going back on your word, is exactly what I'm doing with Justin Fields, simply because Chicago has decided to allow Justin Fields, a quarterback, to throw the ball. He is not a pocket passer. He is a guy who uses his legs, and suddenly now Chicago has devised these offensive game plans for him to use his legs. And go figure, this man is running wild.
A lot like Jalen Hurts, you said on the phone. It's like they started designing runs for him, which helped out.
Yeah, more runs than they've done all year. And go figure, it's working. And again, we're doing the show today, Fantasy Unfocused. I'm watching Fantasy Focus today with our guy, Field Yates. We both love that dude. Yeah. Justin Fields, Field Yates, haha. And he said verbatim, the Chicago Bears are doing with Justin Fields what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts last year. And I laughed because I know, Ryan, in our conversation, I said, isn't this eerily similar to what Jalen Hurts
You definitely did say that. And what's really interesting about all this is that, when it comes to Jalen Hurts, we're seeing a progression with the arm now. And we hope we see that with Justin Fields. But Jalen Hurts, I think I said this to you on the phone a couple of weeks ago, maybe not on the podcast, I can't remember. But Jalen Hurts used to look like he was trying to improvise these scrambles. He was looking like he was trying to improvise Lamar Jackson, and Hurts doesn't have the speed or the athleticism to match Jackson, but it looked like he was kind of just ad-libbing a lot of these runs. It didn't seem like until this year that Jalen Hurts finally looks like he is scripted for the game. He's making safe runs and getting those first downs. And I do feel though that Kyler Murray does that kind of thing. And maybe Fields is more like a Vic or a Lamar Jackson, where he's a little bit more lawless, even though he's having runs designed for him. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just all whether or not we can see it sustained. And I just want to know that, this week, are you starting Fields or Murray?
So I'm starting Fields. I do believe what I saw last week was very interesting. 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 through the ground. He's had 3 rushing touchdowns the last 3 games, 8 throwing touchdowns the last 5 weeks. I see this as progression. What I don't like about Kyler, just to wrap up my idea of why I'm starting to really sour on Kyler, what goes in the offseason, where he started griping about getting his bag and how he needed his money. Well, guess what? He got his money, and the Cardinals are even worse. And the reason I'm deciding to go with Fields this week is Kyler is going against the Los Angeles Rams, who was the team last year in the playoffs that figured out Kyler Murray. And now everybody is recreating this script of rush Kyler Murray. He gets his little happy feet. I said a little for a reason, because his tiny little hands can't hold a football. Hence, go look at the game against Seattle, where when it mattered most, he was fumbling, getting sacked. And that is the reason why I do believe going forward, I will be deploying Justin Fields, taking my gut, as me and you have talked about plenty of times. Go with your gut. And I look at Fields and I say, this is an improved quarterback. I look at Kyler Murray and I go, that's a waste of $200+ million.
I would hate to be presented with that option. I don't want to be the person in charge of that decision. I'm not sure exactly what some of your friends said to you. You told me you asked them about if they were 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30. But like me personally, it's like
everyone's on the fence.
Yeah, I'd have a hard time starting Fields under this next game under a lot of different circumstances. I think, I'm more on board with you doing against Detroit after 3 good performances than I would be like next week after he puts up a bummer. So, when I look at it from that perspective, it's not a crazy thing. Like, let's say, the Cam Akers thing, you're saying, like, he might score 10 points for the rest of the season. I'm like, yeah, I could still see that happening, even after this last game. Sean McVay looks like he's a mess. I don't know if it's Akers or any one person on the team. With Fields, it's like, this would be a bigger rise to stardom than any QB I've seen in a long time. So I hope it happens for him. I really do. It's going to be interesting to see, like, if he keeps this up for the rest of the year, you have to imagine he gets put into the top 5 fantasy QB draft overall conversation. I'd love to see that for him. Speaking of replacing a quarterback, Josh Allen. I don't know if I feel like our seasons are over in some of these leagues we drafted, but he may miss time. They're saying he could have some nerve damage in his UCL. I was actually wondering what you've read about this, because I know you're on a lot of these sites and you have some like apps that like really update you hardcore. But for the most part, I've not been rostering backup QBs due to Allen's durability over the years. I'm finding myself scrambling the waiver wire for Daniel Jones, Jared Goff. I think I saw Marcus Mariota and actually considered him. It's sickening. But here I am, getting on Yahoo right now just to check who may be some of these like lower rostered players. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, off the top of your head, or maybe looking at ESPN right now, if you had to roll with one QB for the rest of the season, God forbid, let's say Josh Allen misses the playoffs, or misses the next couple of weeks, fantasy playoffs, whatever. If you have to roll with somebody because you're in like first through fourth place and you don't want to concede yet, who do you think gives you the best chance of upside and winning that's left on the waiver wire at like less than 50% rostered? So, for example, the Daniel Joneses, the Mariotas, the Garoppolos, like, who are you going to go with?
Okay, to answer the first question, I am terrified of this news with Josh Allen because nothing has gotten better. If anything, we keep hearing these reports that, it's not that big of a deal. Well, today he's missing practice. This goes hand in hand with a pitcher who has either elbow problems or a shoulder problem. That is a huge red flag.
What did we say earlier in the year, Rob?
The rest of the game.
What did we say? We said we were talking about this. We said these news outlets are always pushing this questionable.
Always.
I LOL'd and sent you the screenshot of Keenan Allen being removed from out to questionable yet again. What is this, 9 weeks in a row?
Right.
Anyway, I digress.
I completely agreed. But yeah, I'm completely terrified. And I'm scrambling the way that you are because I have Allen because of our podcast, I was like, I'm getting Allen everywhere I can. So to answer the second question, now that I am terrified with the Josh Allen news, Zach Wilson, I'm going to stay on this New York Jets ship. This is a team, what do we call them? The Diet
Cincinnati Bengals.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And Zach Wilson has the weapons the way, it might not be Josh Allen weapons, but they're eerily similar,
Well, unfortunately, I will say that Zach Wilson does not have a game this week. The other Wilson may still be rostered on some people's teams, but, for example...
Russell Wilson?
Yeah, and in Zach Wilson, I think you're right. I agree with you completely. I would probably roll with him, but unfortunately, he doesn't have one this week. If you had to pick one this week... Well, who would you go with? Mariota, Goff?
Something to that effect. I still like Carolina's quarterback, PJ, what's his name? It looks like he's going to start
PJ Walker, right.
Mayfield, though he didn't look that great. PJ Walker, thank you. And again, that has everything to do with the fact that he has DJ Moore and my boy, what's his name, number 88 that I've been gawking about the last couple weeks. I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah, Terrace Marshall
He's
Jr.
got the weapons too. Terrace Marshall Jr. What concerns me is, like, when I'm looking at my waiver wire right now, I'm looking at the likes of, like, Jacoby Brissett. And I'm like, that's not the guy I want to get. Not at all.
Yeah, so anybody out there with the same issue, you know, go out there and grab a QB while you can if you're still
just throw a dart.
Yeah, Matthew Stafford is still available in a lot of leagues for some reason. That would be one of the first people I looked at. There's got to be some kind of upside.
Yeah, I would too.
You know, in those situations.
Because of the weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
Look for somebody with weapons.
Exactly. Right now, in the updated QB power rankings, it's Mahomes, then Allen, then Jalen Hurts. So we're seeing a rise. You know, maybe we'll see Fields there soon because a lot of these new QBs, they're going to take over the league like that. And people have already jumped all over them. They're going after those fast QBs. So, like, maybe I'd consider Mariota this week if I had to. Rob, I want to play a game right now.
I probably would too.
And it's not going to be as gay as you hope or think it is, but... You know, I was thinking about my team and the sudden decline in RB value that I have right now. I'm on a 2-game win streak. You know, I'm 3-6. I'm kind of at the bottom of the league, but everybody else is not that far ahead. We got a 7-2. We got a couple of 6-3s, a lot of 5-4s, and I feel like if I go on a winning streak, I could still pull this off. I'm not sure if I'm wasting roster spots right now, and I've got like all these backups, as you know, like Brian Robinson. My starter, Najee Harris. I was rostering Deion Jackson. I traded away J-Tay for Cooper Kupp. So, you know, Deion Jackson was kind of like, you know, a fun ad for me to cock block people. Rachaad White. And I just want to hear, you know, your quick opinions here. We're going to call this cuff or snuff. Or should I break these cuffs?
I can break these cuffs.
You can't break those cuffs.
Jalen Warren to Najee Harris. Do you think it's worth the cuff? Do you snuff it and say, fuck it, I don't need that, just take Najee and I'll roll with him? Or do you break these cuffs and get rid of both of them?
I think it's Pittsburgh's offensive line that essentially is just destroying that team, hence why Najee is not doing what he's doing. Jalen Warren, I wouldn't waste my time. I was reading a couple articles here and there for speculative ads to pick up Warren. It ain't going to be me. I'm saying I'm rolling out Najee Harris no matter what.
Brian Robinson to Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm breaking these cuffs on this one. I don't want anything to do with anything on Washington. Their quote-unquote quarterback, Carson Wentz, who, if you've listened to this podcast, we know that Carson Wentz is never going to be the answer for no team. Jahan Dotson's been out. Scary Terry's been subpar pretty much all season simply because they haven't had a quarterback. I want nothing to do with either one of these guys. I'm breaking these cuffs, Ryan.
Rachaad White to Fournette.
All right, so I have been fading on Fournette, and you know that because if you listen to this podcast, I moved him earlier this year. And I like what I'm seeing from Rachaad White. I just don't like what I see from Tampa at all. I don't think they're scoring enough points to even consider having any of these guys. Oh, it's horrifying. Everywhere is saying to sit Tom Brady this week. I don't want to play anybody. I would guess if you're in a dynasty league, let's go ahead and pick up Rachaad White. But if we're in a dynasty league, move Fournette now before it is too late. And it might already be too late.
If you guys can't tell, anybody listens to this 50 View podcast, a lot of these are moves that we are currently making. That's we just kind of want to like hear each other's perspective on what we've been doing in the league. You know, I did pick up Rachaad White when he moved Fournette. So Rob's moving Fournette. I'm picking up Rachaad White. This next one, we're both talking about Gainwell. I mean, Gainwell's on my watch list. We've talked about Miles Sanders and our frustration with him. You know, it's like Damian Harris for me, but I haven't moved Damian Harris off my team. You moved Miles Sanders with Fournette in that trade for Eckler when you had to ship off Godwin with him, though. You know, to the worst team in the league, but you preyed on somebody's, you know, again, their necessities, and that's what you have to do in a trade. But Gainwell to Miles Sanders, do you cuff him?
Very similar to the trade I made with Fournette. You know, Miles Sanders, it is clear that Philly is not comfortable with the run game not named Jalen Hurts. So I don't know what to believe when it comes to the run game. I was tired of sitting Sanders when he would go off like he did against the Jags, of course. But I like Kenneth Gainwell. That was somebody that you had brought to my attention last year. I was sitting with him with a handcuff, but right now I don't want to have to do anything with either one of these guys. Similar to that of White, in a dynasty league, I'm picking up Gainwell and I'm benching him because Miles Sanders is in his walk year this year, and I don't think Philly's going to waste the money. And I don't think they're going to re-sign Miles Sanders, and I'm not going to be shocked. Ain't going to be Boston Scott. Let's get real. I think Kenneth Gainwell is going to be the lead back in Philly come next year if they don't draft another running back next season.
JaMychal Hasty to Etienne.
JaMychal Hasty is JaMychal Hasty. Let's get real here, okay? Snoop Connor's the guy that I'm really intrigued in seeing if he's going to tend to get more touches now going forward. Snoop Connor came out of Ole Miss. He broke all sorts of records at Ole Miss. This was a guy you didn't hear about because, you know what? You don't hear much about Ole Miss and their running back situation. But the Jags, interestingly enough, drafted him last year, and I dug into some numbers. I'm like, okay, this is a pretty interesting guy. Could be the opposite back that James Robinson technically was at one point, and I do believe that's why James Conner was ran out of town. I believe they look at Snoop Conner kind of going, hey, we got a similar situation in a running back situation. They knew Etienne was the guy, hence why he was drafted in the first round, people. James Robinson wasn't drafted, guys. JaMychal Hasty is JaMychal Hasty. He got his touches last week. He looked like JaMychal Hasty. I'm not going to be shocked if we see Connor take about 5, maybe 8 carries in this next game against Kansas City. I'm not going to be shocked at all. So Snoop Connor's a guy I'm not saying go pick up, but watch him very closely. He's been on my watch list literally since day one. So I say take a very close look at Snoop Conner before anybody else does.
JaMychal Hasty has a 7.3 YPC average on the year, and ESPN reports him having a 15-yard long. That really skews things. It's not true. JaMychal Hasty actually had a 61, 62-yard rush on the season. So a lot of his yards came from one single play, and ESPN's not reporting that. So they're making him look like a more efficient running back than he actually is. Isaiah Pacheco, I have not been paying much attention to him this year. I feel like Kansas City has no running game, whether or not it's Pacheco or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire is definitely not looking like, he was the better running back than Jonathan Taylor, even with Jonathan Taylor's injuries. Do you cuff?
CEH needs to be faded on. Kansas City does not rely on the run game. They never have. They have some guy named Patrick Mahomes on his team, and their ragtag team of wide receivers. Never should have traded Tyreek Hill, people. But very similar to that of White and Gainwell in dynasty leagues. Yes, go pick up Pacheco and hope that something eventually happens.
Yeah.
But going forward, Kansas City's not going to rely on the run game. Oh, and they also have some guy named Travis Kelce on their team too. So CEH, if you can trade him now, trade him now. Nothing's going to get any better with him.
All right, this last session, this is just going to be for you and me as Jacksonville fans. I want to call this the Jag-off session.
Let's jag off!
The Jags game plan against Las Vegas.
Okay, so we saw a tale of two sides. We saw the first half that you were griping about, which was let's keep feeding Etienne the ball over and over and over and over and over again. And guess what? Defenses get accustomed to that. They know that we're going to be lining up in a certain formation, and Etienne is getting the ball. What is interesting about the first half is the last 2 drives we scored touchdowns on. Holy crap! And then guess what happened in the third quarter? We opened the third quarter getting the ball and scored another touchdown. And suddenly, we took over the game, first time all season, and we won the game. We were down 17-0. Now, my argument every time that, Ryan, you would bring this up, I would say, I believe we are creating the identity for the Jaguars, which was a run-heavy team, to essentially let T-Law get comfortable. And what happened in the second quarter? T-Law looked comfortable. And things like the playbook started opening up. The only thing, and this is to your credit, Ryan, that we haven't seen yet is Etienne in the open field getting passes thrown to him.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that is going to happen. There is no doubt in my mind we're going into Kansas City knowing one thing. One, we have to run the ball. Why, you ask? Well, here's an interesting statistic for you. Travis Etienne now, in the last 3 games, has over 100 yards rushing and 1 rushing touchdown. There is only one there's only one running back in the NFL right now who has done that, and he has passed it. He's done 5 in a row. Guess who it's been? Derrick Henry. Now, don't get me wrong. Derrick Henry and Etienne are 2 vastly different running backs, but Kansas City's defense could not stop Derrick Henry. Go figure. Sure, why not? But that tells me that defense can get ran on. I am not going to be shocked if the Jaguars go into Kansas City essentially looking at that blueprint that Tennessee created. Now, mind you, okay, our best wide receiver is Christian Kirk. Who's the best Titans wide receiver? Oh, that's right, that hooker, Robert Woods.
Yeah, but I agree. Like, what needs to happen against Kansas City is, like, we need to use our number 1 pick, who's got a pretty good draft grade even after the draft, and we need to use Josh Allen and kind of put pressure on the quarterback. This week Mahomes is very hard, and he's good under pressure. But at the same time, what I think we could do without some of his top threats is kind of neutralize the middle if we play our free safeties a little bit deeper than we usually do and stuff like that. Do you think there's any path to a losing record playoffs right now? I mean, here's the thing. The Colts are shaking up with their QB situation. Frank Reich is fired. We got Jeff Saturday coming in, pissing off all the fucking liberals. The Titans take an L this week, and then they have to play us twice this season. What do you think is realistically? Do you think my dad's more correct where he's like, 3 to 5 wins, or do you think I'm more correct where it's like 7 to 10? And you've never given a solid answer what you think their record will be. You just want to see the growth. Where do you think they could be at the end of this season?
Just commenting on what I've seen so far. Again, we're the only team with a positive point differential with a losing record. What does that tell you? We've been so close every single game, and I know that narrative gets old, but guess what? We have never, ever, ever in the franchise's history have been able to say that. Now, we have had success, but what I'm saying is we've never lost well. Okay, I know that sounds ridiculous. I read a forum where some dude's like, I wish we could go back to just get blown out so I don't get my hopes up. I go, okay, you're not a true fan. I guess you don't understand how football works. A team gets better, and we support them as they lose, but now we eclipse us losing in Vegas. We were 17-0. I don't understand why people aren't excited about this win. We were losing 17-0, and we won. And we essentially dismantled that team in the second half. I think Derek Carr had 36 yards passing after carving us up in the first half. Devontae Adams was going to pull a Joe Mixon fuck you and a Justin Fields kind of day. I'm not going to be shocked if we go in there and give Kansas City a fight.
Well, that was certainly an extended Jag-off session. Football is a game of inches. I just hope that this weekend it's a game of inches inside the Chiefs' mother. Once again, this was Fantasy R&R with Rob and Ryan. We'll see you next time.